We're joined by Josh King, who's the head of communications at ICE, the parent company of the New York Stock Exchange. Josh, great to have you here with us today. What does today and the summer series itself mean to you?
Well, Brad, first of all, we're so happy to be here outside at the corner of Wall and Broad Street, this historic intersection where the New York Stock Exchange was founded 229 years ago. But what I'm really waiting for is you. You're inside. I'm sitting here outside waiting for all the festivities to begin. You know we have the opening bell today of FSKKR Financial Services, which normally, as you know, because you're covering the exchange from the inside, not a lot of people get to see, but we have this massive display behind me where all of the passers-by, the residents, the tourists, all of the people who are now increasingly coming out after the pandemic reopening gets in earnest underway, they're going to get to see what's happening inside the exchange by watching both the opening and closing bells, our IPOs over the next few weeks, and between all those events, a lot of food and entertainment and fun here on Broad Street at our summer series, beginning with the WNBA's New York Liberty today.
Love it. Okay, and so Josh, I'll consider that my official invitation to come outside from here on the floor of the exchange, so I'll be out there in a little bit. We also know that the New York Stock Exchange is celebrating frontline workers through this summer series. Walk us through some of the details there.
Well, let's take a step back, Brad. I mean, you were probably on the floor March 20th, 2020, the last day before the New York Stock Exchange had to close for about 9 weeks during the pandemic. Didn't reopen until May 26th when Governor Cuomo was here to ring the opening bell. That was a long time of great fear, uncertainty, isolation for so many. You probably walked the streets as I did during those weeks. Hardly a soul where I am now. But the people who were here were those frontline workers, the people in the hospitals, doctors and nurses, the people on so many of our listed companies who were putting up utility lines, repairing services that had fallen asunder. When you and I would go to the supermarket and buy some food, the people behind the mask, behind that thin plate of plexiglass, were the people who were working every day. Well, thanks to technology, I could work at ICE and the New York Stock Exchange, you could work at Cheddar from the safety and comfort of our own apartments. Those were dark days back then. When it came around a couple months ago, Stephanie Brown, our chief marketing officer, along with Stacey Cunningham, the president of the New York Stock Exchange, we got together and we said, what can we do to celebrate the reopening, to help the reopening proceed? And that's what led to the summer series. And it really is dedicated in these initial weeks to all those people who kept us light when things seemed so dark.
This comes after a time of, as you were mentioning and alluding to, so many changes have taken place in our societal fabric, in the way that we interact with one another. But even here at the New York Stock Exchange as well, whether that's renovations, whether that's the way that companies are going public, and even down to the bell ringing. We've seen more of the virtual bell ringings over the past year as well. I mean, is that something that you see sticking around, the virtual bell ringings, and allowing companies another way to also kind of take part in the celebratory fashion of opening and closing the market, but perhaps from the comfort of where they are at with their employees and in other capacities?
Sure, Brad. Well, I mean, if you've been on site now for a while back and watching what happens at the New York Stock Exchange. You've monitored this progression from, figuring out our technology to allow a few people to get on camera on a Zoom call on that podium behind us for an opening bell, up to many people, sometimes in the Far East, they're actually recreating the whole bell scene. But I think if we're given a choice, and that is always possible, as Cheddar has been able to function full-time without actually being on the floor, I've been able to host my podcast sometimes from remote locations when I haven't been at work. So too have companies who have major milestones or IPOs to celebrate have done it remotely using some of the video things that you've mentioned. But if you've given your druthers, wouldn't you much prefer your 15 top executives to be on the podium celebrating that milestone moment, along with several hundred of your employees and investors and people involved in your company on the floor cheering you on? I mean, you've seen over the last few weeks increased participation, increased attendance at some of these events. we can only hope that it is going to increase and get back to normal and get better than normal with some of the additional technology that we've brought to bear.
Certainly. All right, well, so I'm wholeheartedly expecting an NFT creation for some of the most popular bell ceremonies that have taken place over the past decades as well, where video footage allows to this point. Just lastly, Josh, while we have you, what can a company that goes public now with the New York Stock Exchange expect on the day one and then beyond?
Well, if I'm hearing you right, Brad, what can they expect day one? I mean, first of all, and tell me if I'm wrong, the full bell experience is getting quickly back to normal. FSKKR Capital ringing the opening bell today. We've got a series of IPOs, really the busiest in our record, both IPOs, direct listings, and also SPAC combinations planned throughout the summer. This Experience Square location behind me is open to all of them, in addition to the entertainment, food that we're putting on. So if people watch our website at NYSE.com, they'll see not only the opening bell, but so much of the photography from when hundreds of people gather here. We also put it on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn as well. So anyone who wants to follow this amazing amount of activity that really has continued uninterrupted since the pandemic began, albeit with all of the safeguards, protocols, social distancing that we've had to employ to keep the floor open, it really has not missed a beat, not a single beat, even when we had to go all electronic. But now, we're happy New York is reopening. The summer series is part of celebrating that moment and welcoming everybody back to the historic intersection of Wall and Broad Street.
Josh King, Head of Communications at ICE, the parent company of the New York Stock Exchange. Thank you so much for joining us here today, and we're excited for the summer series. I'll be out there in a hot second.